Well, hello everybody. So today I've been trying to figure out how to do this translation in a way that is not so long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it by sections that I think are pertinent, and instead of doing the whole video, that way you can see just what you're interested in. So today we're starting with the part about the President AMLO is puts lets them know that he knows and had it researched and knows that Reforma, the it's kind of like a sensationalist, kind of like Inquirer, sensationalist, sensationalist newspaper, and they're usually against the president, they're always trying to find fault in him. But anyway, so yesterday they made mention that uh, that there was some condoning of taxes happening with his current government, and that they had the evidence and this and that. So anyway, he said, "Well, we'll research it, and today we'll be discussing his findings." And here we go. So we're going to be answering some questions today, but just uh, he's going to have a parenthesis to clarify what Reforma, the newspaper, said. And we said we were going to check into it to see if it was true that they had condoned the taxes for some persons, physical or moral. Technically, and we demonstrated, and it was proven that it wasn't true. It is uh, some technical stuff that was utilized in bad faith or without enough caution to make sure or to affirm something that does not conform with reality. This is what they put on there. He says, looks like they went overboard a little bit, right? So therefore, the director of SAT is going to explain this supposed condemnation or forgiveness, if they actually gave it or not. So they want you to explain the note. And and I'm going to let you know in advance that I've decided that they're going to continue with their positions, because if it had been true, then they would have to be quit their jobs, and we would have to accuse them before the competent authorities. But since it is not the case, we have a lot of confidence in them, and they're honest and integral people, and they're professionals. But we need to clarify it or clear things up, because the conservative press, in this case it was Reforma, and they just don't stop attacking us in different ways and forms. But of course, they have a right. It is their job to oppose themselves against what we're doing, but we have the right to replica, and we're doing it. and we do it to its uh, full measure. So now he's letting her talk. So she says, "Hello, good day. Thank you for your attention. This is a little bit technical and complex, but nothing that you won't be able to understand." So, okay, so she's saying that this is going to be a little bit tricky because these companies are actually non-existent, probably ghost companies, which is what they're trying to get rid of. But what they do is they um, uh, put them in a sector so that later they can go after the people whose names appeared on any of the documentation and go after their money afterwards. So they just kind of set it aside. They don't close it out. So she says we have not condoned or forgiven any taxes to anyone. So the only thing is that they did was obey the fiscal or the actual code for taxes that's in the Constitution. Ow, sorry. Jeez, okay. Getting old. All right. So anyway, she says the only thing they did was to um, put put them on hold for the moment. So she says in the fiscal tax code in section 146A indicates what it is that they are allowed to do in the case of situations such as this, where there is no one that they can, or they have no funds, or they have someone that they can't find the person because it's a ghost company. So they have this um, uh, part of their job is to continuously be checking a list to see if any of the names that they've put on there as owing taxes come up. And that is because the other agencies will let them know when someone that is on that list has money in an account anywhere. So if she says, so what we do is we put a quantity that we know we're supposed to charge, and from there we can figure out how we are going to be doing the economical adjustments, charges, etc. Oh, sorry. Uh, Google off. So they can't. Um, so they have to make sure that they can do all the calculations, and otherwise it would be incorrect. So what they do, she says, on this section 146A, they can do a like accounting lowering, but it's only in order to put it on hold. She says this does not mean that the uh, debt was forgiven. So it's not like some kind of preferential treatment. It's absolutely the contrary.
Lo que hacemos es ponerlo aparte para podernos dedicar a los créditos que podemos cobrar.
So what they do is they set it aside so that then they can use the uh, credits that they can use in order to charge them.
Hoy, ahorita y tal, precisamente por la recaudación, y eso lo ponemos aparte.
So that's the money that they will be able to collect now. That they separate it from the one that they know they can't collect at the moment, so that it's done for a later time.
¿Por qué? Porque cumple con uno de los dos requisitos, o que porque está ilocalizable o porque es, ¿cómo se llama? Que no tiene bienes.
So she says that it meets two of the criteria, whether it's they're unable to, they have no funds that they could collect from, or appear to have no funds, or that they oh my gosh, I already forgot the second part. Let me go back for a moment here. I'm sorry. I need to know exactly what I'm going to say right there.
Para podernos dedicar a los créditos que podemos cobrar hoy, ahorita y tal, precisamente por la recaudación, y esto lo ponemos aparte. ¿Por qué? Porque cumple con uno de los dos requisitos, o que porque está ilocalizable o porque es, ¿cómo se llama? Que no tiene bienes.
Okay, so she says one is they cannot locate the funds or the company, or they cannot, or they have no funds or money that's disposable income.
¿No? Eso no significa, insisto, que no tenga, que se dé un trato preferente, porque no se perdona. En el momento que aparezca un bien, que alguien lo diga, oye, tiene este bien la persona, eso no se vuelve a dar real, pero es una cosa de momento. Eso se da real otra vez, y se inicia todo el proceso de compra. Lo que hacemos nosotros en esta administración,
She says if at
no se realiza
any time they find out that there's funds, they have money that's become available to them, then they will pounce on them to get the money that they continue to owe.
Es coordinarnos con este tipo de información con la unidad de inteligencia financiera y con la autoridad fiscal.
So they will coordinate themselves with the uh, financial departments in order to get the funds at some point.
Federación. Entonces, por ejemplo, cuando hacemos esas bajas contables, lo que hacemos es pasarle a la unidad de inteligencia financiera los casos para que mantenga un monitoreo en el sistema financiero y, por decirlo así, le mande como una banderita en caso de que las personas que...
So she says that they will let the other departments know, the ones that are in charge of money and evaluating people's money. They, as soon as that they find out that this person has any money, they will have a red flag, and they'll tell them to notify them that there are funds available, so they can go and collect what they owe.
Para nosotros tener localizables o que aparentemente no les encontramos bienes, pues se levanta esa banderita y aparezca que están moviéndose, y nosotros podemos llegar en ese momento, la sacamos de la baja contable y llegamos en ese momento.
So as soon as they find out that there's any funds available, they will go and just attach the money and hold it.
Y también, pues bueno, también no basta que las personas o los contribuyentes tengan bienes fuera de México, porque...
But also, it's not enough if they have money that's outside of Mexico.
Necesitamos la posibilidad nosotros de poder ejecutar, poder embargar, si está fuera de y no hay...
So we need to be able to have access to be able to get the money. And if they're outside of our country, so they need some kind of instrument that's international, so that they can access or communicate with them about getting access to the money or the funds, so they can collect their taxes.
Que implica la colaboración de embargos y demás, y no solo de intercambio de información, pues estamos expensas de que la autoridad extranjera acepte
So she says that unless there was some kind of uh, rule like that, we're kind of at the disposal of whatever country they're holding their money in to if they will release the funds or not.
En eso. Entonces, no hay tal como perdón, es una limpieza de cartera, se pone aparte, no es
So there is no forgiveness. It is set aside in a different file.
como que ya para siempre se quitó. Ahora también estos
It's not forgiven forever, removed forever.
son casos que vienen colgados de la cartera, algunos de hace mucho tiempo.
And some of them had been on hold for a very long time already.
De transacciones auditorias viejas.
And there was some transactions that were audited in the past or old ones.
La cartera puede reflejar alguna información no o perspectivas no realizables.
And this file could also show perspectives or funds that were not being able to be collected or be realized, is how they put it.
Y en ese sentido tenemos que ser nosotros muy responsables con la información que se comunica a la Secretaría de Hacienda.
So in this case, we have to be very responsible about the information we communicate with the Department of Hacienda
Y al Congreso.
and to Congress.
Y yo quisiera pedirle al Administrador General de Recaudación, el licenciado Vázquez Luna, que
So she wants to ask the supervisor of collecting taxes, Hector Luna,
hemos sido muy responsable con todos estos temas
and he's been very responsible with all these matters.
que son impopulares, pero que son necesarios.
They are unpopular, but they are necessary
Es el mandato del Código Fiscal de la Federación.
because it is part of the mandate or federal code.
Pues que ahonde un poquito más. Hay otra cosa también, todos
And so that it has to be given just a little bit more. And then she said, there's another thing.
tipo de cancelaciones siempre son supervisadas por la
And all this type of cancellations are always supervised
Auditoría Superior de la Federación y
by the Superior Federation
por el órgano interno de control.
and by an internal organ of control.
Y es más, también cuando no estamos nosotros
And additionally, if we are not present
atendiendo los créditos por
attending the credits that still need to be collected,
cobra, porque no está localizada la persona, por
because say for example they cannot locate the person,
ejemplo, puede llegar a la
for
Auditoría
example.
Superior de la Federación y decir, ¿por qué no están ustedes ejecutando estos créditos?
So the Federation could come and tell them, why are you not executing these credits?
Y no le podemos decir, es que está ilocalizable.
And we can't say, well, we just can't locate them.
Porque así, pues, aquí está la cartera, tienes el deber de ejecutarlos.
And then she says, they'll tell us, well, it's listed here on the file, it is your duty to execute it.
Por eso es fundamental también
That is why it is fundamental also
por la seguridad jurídica interna de los funcionarios del SAT
for the internal judicial and the people, employees of SAT,
pues estar cumpliendo constantemente. O sea, si no
to be complying constantly. Otherwise,
lo puedo localizar ahorita, puedo dedicar la atención al que sí puedo recaudar algo.
so we set it aside, and if we can't locate that person now, we will move on to one that we can locate and collect the funds from.
Que sí lo puedo ejecutar el crédito fiscal, porque si no está habiendo una irregularidad, no están nosotros, los funcionarios, atrás de aquello.
So it would also be an irregularity for us, the functioning officials, not to be working on that.
Entonces, si me explico, pero en todo caso aquí me quedo para las dudas y el Administrador General de Recaudación pues tiene una presentación.
So she says, I don't know if you guys understood me completely, but I'll be on standby. And so then they're going to have the next person speak, the one who is the tax collector.
Si la tengo encargada ya aquí, para ahondar en este caso.
So hello and good day. The next one. So he said this is the um, uh, cartera, which is like the, I guess, the list of controlled, um, let's see, equivalent controlled for the SAT, a representative. So here he says there's an amount of 7,997,924 million pesos, which is the equivalent of 1,595,3,001 credits for the tax purposes. And that is a very large uh, file of charges. So he says, what is the cancellation of credits? He says, so I've always disliked that word cancellation of credits. It doesn't look well, and it sounds like it can be misinterpreted. Um, but so I guess they're going to explain what it is. So some people think that it means to forgive a debt, but it is not debt forgiveness. It's just a lowering for accounting purposes and to be able to compare accounts. So it's a sub account where they put the funds that after collecting the other funds, they will be able to access them. So they do an exhaustive evaluation, internal exam, um, to see if there are any funds available. Financial section, vehicles, etc. So after they've done their full investigation, they take it to that sub account for cancellation. Again, that word sounds very much like forgiveness. But it does not forgive or liberate you from the obligation to pay. So at the moment that they find out that there are funds available, they will reinstate the debt and or like put it where it's now receivable, and they will go and collect it. So sometimes after they've done their evaluation, they find out that they've got vehicles or something that they could use after the fact. And so then they would reactivate the file and then go to the collection department. But besides that, SAT does put out this information in the transparency department. We publish this information. It is in there. And you can obtain it from there because we have it on our page. So at the time that we apply that sub account or the debt that appeared to be canceled, we publicize it.
para que la ciudadanía se entere que están ahí
So then the citizens will be able to find out that it is there.
y hasta para que nos ayuden.
And also so they can help us.
Porque a veces, después de haber hecho todas las investigaciones, sí, les digo si se llegan a localizar algunos billetes.
So sometimes after the fact, that we've done all this and we set it aside, then someone will let us know some information and then we can reopen it.
Adelante, por favor. ¿Cuáles son los efectos de la cancelación?
So what are the effects of this cancellation?
Es similar a una cuenta de banco donde ya cuentas que después de haber agotado todas las acciones de cobro ya no es posible hacerlo.
It's very much like when you have a bank account and there's no funds in it and you've taken all the money from it for charges that you can charge and there's nothing left.
De hecho, las administraciones tributarias en el mundo practican esta depuración.
And as it stands, many countries around the world or many places in the world use this model in order to do their taxes.
Normalmente dentro de sus procesos hacen esta cancelación de adeudos.
It is normal within their processes to do this cancellation of debt,
Para depurar cartera y ya
to create a file,
enfocarse a la cartera que sea correcta.
to be able to focus on the funds that are possible to collect from.
Tenga bienes, que sea susceptible.
So they will go after an account that is susceptible
De poder aplicar ese adeudo.
so that they can apply that debt.
¿Qué acciones se hacen? O sea, prácticamente después de que
So what actions are done? He says practically after
analizamos, investigamos,
we analyze and we investigate
fuentes internas, fuentes externas, todos los paneles, toda la información
all the information, all the patterns
con la que cuenta el SAT,
with which SAT is SAT. I believe it's kind of like their tax collecting service. We'll have to look what the acronym stands for, but I'm pretty sure it's like how we have the federal government and the state government taxes, like that.
y demás fuentes externas de bienes.
And then also external accounts that have funds.
Después se envía a buró de crédito. Un contribuyente ya después de eso se envía a buró de crédito y están ahí.
So then they put it in a section of credit, and then it is put in their account in that way.
Todos estos deudores aparecen en buró de crédito para efecto de los efectos que tiene.
So it will appear in the credit department, and it will affect them.
El buró financieramente.
And it will affect it via the credit bureau.
También se cancelan sellos, se cancelan sellos digitales.
And they also cancel digital accounts.
¿Qué quiere decir? Una empresa que se le practicó la cancelación.
So what does this mean? That a company for which they practice the cancellation process
Prácticamente fiscalmente queda muerta.
fiscally appears to be dead.
Ya no puede emitir facturas, ya no puede entrar.
And it will no longer be able to put in accounts receivable, and it can no longer operate.
Porque no tiene bienes, entonces no puede facturar, no tiene.
So since it has no funds, it cannot be doing any business.
Con qué responder para pagar los impuestos.
So how will then they be able to respond when it comes time to pay their taxes again?
Pues no puede facturar ya.
So he will no longer be able to perform work.
Si tuviera cuentas se congelan
And if he had accounts, they would be frozen.
y sería la información le decía
And then they would give the information to CIA or from CIA
a la unidad de inteligencia financiera y a la
to the financial agency,
autoridad fiscal de la federación.
and then the tax department of the federation.
Adelante, por favor. Efectos de la cancelación.
So what are the effects of the cancellation?
Quedan inhabilitados, ya les decía, para seguir operando.
So they become unable to operate the business anymore.
Sigue la investigación para localizar.
And they will continue the investigation in order to locate and realize goods of the contributors. So they will be susceptible for embargo to be executed and recuperate the debt.
Bien, todavía después de esto se continúa investigando. Ya,
and it will continue to
el
be.
periodo cada 3 meses.
So they will be continuing to check their business. They'll continue checking up on them every 3 months, like doing a rechecking to see if they have any funds. And in case on the bottom when it says in case they cannot locate funds or there exists no possibility of additional collection, then they will determine the responsibility for social action from the companies, and they will be subject to the CFF, whatever that is.
Vuelve a investigar sector financiero, se vuelve a investigar sobre bienes para ver si continúa. ¿Qué pasa con los socios de estas empresas?
So he says, what happens with the like people that had also got interest in this property, or like say they have a vested interest? What happens to them?
Personas físicas que son socios o accionistas de esta empresa. Eventualmente también el Código Fiscal prevé una posible fisión.
So eventually they will go after any associates of that company.
Ubican los puestos de responsabilidad solidaria. Primero se tendría que aplicar la responsabilidad solidaria y una vez
First they would have to apply the responsibility to them,
aplicada, ya podemos ir contra bienes propiedad de estas personas.
and then we can go after the properties and the goods of this person or the funds of this person.
Físicas. Pero
Any
antes,
physical.
La propia ley nos obliga a irnos solo sobre bienes de las empresas.
So initially, the law itself allows us to go only strictly after the company's finances.
Solo sobre el patrimonio de las empresas. Adelante, por favor.
So he says only on the actual company funds.
Percepción de riesgo también, por eso quedan inhabilitadas, por eso se envía a Corpo Fiscal para que las acciones penales las realicen a la unidad de inteligencia financiera y pues después ya son cancelados.
So he says that they will be now considered a risky client, and they will take action to start socially going after them.
Adelante, por favor. ¿Por qué cancelamos? ¿Por qué cancelamos? Pues en principio.
So why do we cancel? He says at the beginning.
Es depurar la cartera. Es una acción constante que la ley nos marca y que también eventualmente cuando llegan a supervisar las autoridades la Auditoría Superior de la Federación.
Okay, so here it says the attribution of canceling fiscal credits is a measure utilized with the administration tribunals or tributaries that form the OCDE, and to its end, it will count the amounts of the credits that are healthy and manageable. And then the second part says, if they do not execute the faculty of canceling the account or the credits via the CFF code, then the SAT or the government would be subject to being observed by the OIC, which is another government section that oversees them, and they would be audited by the Superior Court of the Federation. And so then here the information of that file the credits or importations, uh, this would become a uh, it will be made public every 3 months. And by doing this, they give a message to the citizens that SAT has a great accounting of incomes that are still to be collected in the future. But in reality, this is not so because we only recover about 5% of these amounts due to the impunities of contributors that are insolvent or companies that are created without active members. So these are like these ghost companies. So he says either they will collect the funds and close it out, or they will put this in the accounting file, and then they will notify for it to be collected in the future. So he says this is the information of how it's done, and we have been very punctual in putting out every bit of information as it happens into the um, Department of Transparency. So you can go online and look at any of these accounts using their transparency department. So it's in the SAT page. That's where the answers will be 20 questions regarding any company. They publicize everything as soon as they have the information.
También es importante porque de esta cartera ya es la última etapa de todo. Después.
So it's also important because when it gets onto this file, then it is part of the end of the closing of the case. That's after they've done all the auditing. Eventually, they will have to liquidate. They were unable to collect the debt. But that will remain executable, or they will be able to um, collect on it later because they set it aside. Unfortunately, all these uh, files that we've been carrying from the previous governments, we've only been able to recover 5%. So he says that's why it's important that we purge it and we set it aside so that we can have the manageable amounts, not to have over 1.5 million that's not collectible uh, in this case. So he says with all the people, all the technology, all the personnel that we have, we cannot do enough in this department. So we need to purge the system. So this is the internal process that we do in order to do the cancellation. So when we receive the debt, we start the process of investigation. So we verify outside sources and internal sources. So we check, for example, if they have vehicles, if they've got anything like that, because we have the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles.
etcétera. Muchas fuentes de información que nos
There are lots of resources for information that we can access.
ayudan a localizar bienes.
And these will help us to locate their uh, what they own.
Y fuentes internas, tenemos unas 30 fuentes internas también de localización de bienes de todas.
So we have about